The Crothan ships sliced through Earth's atmosphere like silent predators, their sleek, angular forms reflecting the cold emptiness of space. Each vessel was a masterpiece of alien engineering, towering over the cities below. Their hulls glistened with a strange, obsidian metal, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The air around them hummed with a low, pulsing energy, a sound that sent vibrations through the ground, rattling windows and shaking the very earth. The skies darkened as the Crothan fleet descended, blocking out the sun over entire continents. To the humans below, it was an omen, a harbinger of inevitable doom. Inside the command ship, the Crothan observed Earth with a detached curiosity. Their sensory arrays scanned every detail, the layout of the cities, the limited military defenses, the scattered population. It was laughably primitive. One of the commanders spoke through his neural link, a thought transmitting effortlessly to the others in the fleet. This is barely worth our effort. These humans, they're little more than disorganized tribes with toys. Their cities, weak. Their armies, scattered. This will be over quickly. Another commander, floating within his command pod, sent a signal of agreement. It's a wonder they've survived this long. The other conquests were at least challenging. This will be routine, and the rewards minimal. Routine, indeed, came the final thought from the lead commander. His mind pulsed with contempt as he monitored the surface below. Prepare the harvesters. We will strip this planet clean and move on. Humanity will become nothing more than a footnote in the Crothan archives. The ships deployed their landing crafts. Metallic tendrils extended from the underbellies of the craft as they made contact with Earth's soil. Soldiers poured out, tall, sleek, encased in impenetrable armor. Their weapons, sleek plasma rifles, hummed with energy. The first targets were chosen: military installations, communication centers, power grids. With a wave of the commander's hand, the assault began. The human military forces scrambled to respond. Tanks rolled through city streets, anti-aircraft missiles fired into the sky, fighter jets streaked into the air, desperately trying to gain some ground. But it was futile. The Crothan's energy shields absorbed the incoming fire without a flicker. A single sweep from their weapons vaporized entire battalions. Buildings crumbled into dust as their plasma cannons obliterated human infrastructure with surgical precision. Pathetic, one of the Crothan soldiers thought as he stepped over the remains of a human military outpost, his boots crunching through the debris. He aimed his rifle at a retreating squad of soldiers and fired, reducing them to ash without a second thought. They have no concept of real war. From high above, the Crothan leader observed the carnage with clinical detachment. His elongated fingers danced across the holographic displays in front of him, directing the invasion as though it were nothing more than a routine exercise. His pale eyes, devoid of emotion, focused on the global map in front of him. Red dots blinked out one by one as human resistance crumbled across the planet. As expected, he thought. This planet will fall within the next cycle. These humans, they are fragile, predictable. There is nothing here to challenge us. Another world added to our empire, another species conquered. His voice carried a note of boredom as he mentally communicated with his subordinates. Keep the pressure on their cities. Crush their will. We will break them before they even understand what hit them. He turned his attention to the battlefield screens, watching as the human forces continued their futile efforts. Tanks exploded, jets spiraled out of control, crashing into the ground like wounded birds. The humans were scrambling, disorganized, and panicked. Just as his data had predicted. It's almost disappointing, the leader mused. I was hoping for more of a challenge. But no matter. We will finish this and be gone before they even have time to comprehend their fate. His mind pulsed with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Crothan had never faced defeat, and this invasion would be no different. They would crush this world, enslave its population, and strip the planet of its resources, just as they had done to countless others. Humanity would be erased from history, a forgotten footnote in the grand expansion of the Crothan Empire. The leader leaned back in his command pod, feeling the cold embrace of victory already washing over him. Another world conquered. Another species broken. The invasion spread rapidly. Crothan ships loomed over every continent, their dark silhouettes a constant reminder of Earth's impending doom. Cities were in chaos, and military forces were scattered, trying to regroup after the initial onslaught. But despite the overwhelming odds, something unexpected began to happen. Humanity did not fold. Instead of surrendering, they fought back, harder than the aliens had anticipated. It wasn't just the military that resisted. Civilians began to organize, forming underground networks, sharing information and supplies. Makeshift weapons were built from whatever they could find. Metal pipes, old tools, and discarded scrap were turned into lethal devices. They scavenged from destroyed alien tech, reverse engineering it in crude but effective ways. Guerrilla fighters emerged from every corner, striking with speed and precision, disappearing before the aliens could retaliate. In small towns and big cities alike, resistance pockets formed, and these ragtag groups hit the Crothan where they least expected: supply lines, communication hubs, and energy sources. In one village, a group of mechanics managed to disable an alien walker by using a hacked construction drone, welding scrap metal to its arms and using it to collapse the towering machine's legs. In another, a group of teenagers rigged an alien plasma rifle to overload and explode inside a Crothan outpost, taking down several soldiers with nothing more than what they found in the ruins of a tech store. Across the globe, human scientists worked feverishly, analyzing bits of Crothan armor and weapons, seeking vulnerabilities. In makeshift labs and bombed-out research facilities, they discovered weaknesses in the aliens' energy shields, transmitting their findings through encrypted networks. Everywhere the Crothan advanced, they were met with human ingenuity. Ordinary people, teachers, factory workers, students, picked up arms, using whatever they could to fight back. In one rural area, farmers dug trenches and laid traps, using old hunting techniques to lure Crothan patrols into ambushes. City dwellers used the urban landscape to their advantage, creating mazes of sniper points and booby traps in high-rise buildings. The aliens found themselves in a war they hadn't prepared for, one not fought on open battlefields but in alleyways, forests, and the shadows of demolished streets. The Crothan, who had assumed this would be an easy conquest, began to notice the resistance was not weakening, but growing stronger. Their forces, though technologically superior, struggled to adapt to the unpredictability of human tactics. What should have been a routine sweep of the planet became a series of delays and setbacks. Inside their command centers, alien commanders exchanged thoughts of confusion and frustration. These humans, why haven't they broken yet? We've crushed their cities, destroyed their armies, and yet they continue to fight. One commander looked at the growing number of red zones on the global map where human resistance was active. It made no sense. On other worlds, the native species had surrendered quickly, recognizing the futility of resistance. But the humans, these frail, scattered beings, were different. They were adapting, learning from each encounter. We underestimated them, the commander finally admitted. They are more tenacious than expected. They refuse to accept defeat. In a remote region, a group of resistance fighters staged a daring raid. Using stolen Crothan tech, they managed to intercept an alien convoy, reprogramming the vehicles to turn on their own. The convoy's guards were neutralized in minutes, their advanced weapons no match for the humans' hit-and-run tactics. By the time Crothan reinforcements arrived, the humans had disappeared into the mountains, leaving only the smoldering wreckage of what had once been an impenetrable convoy. The leader of the alien forces, monitoring the situation from high orbit, watched the feed from the raid. His pale eyes narrowed as he saw the convoy burning, the once perfect machinery lying in ruins. He sent a sharp command across the network, frustration evident in every pulse of his thought. This planet is not behaving as predicted. Adjust strategies immediately. Yet, even as new strategies were developed, the damage had been done. The Crothan were now facing something they had never encountered before, a species that refused to yield, that adapted with every strike, and whose spirit seemed unbreakable. The invasion that was supposed to be swift was now dragging into something far more dangerous, a war of attrition, one where humanity's resilience might prove to be the aliens' undoing. Something was going wrong, and the Crothan couldn't ignore it any longer. Their ships, once the pride of their fleet, started experiencing malfunctions. At first, it was minor, a few drones not responding, a glitch in the targeting systems. But soon, the issues became widespread. Transport vessels failed mid-flight, power systems flickered, and entire sections of their communications grid went dark. Orders from the high command weren't reaching the ground troops, and supply drops never made it to their intended targets. The Crothan's complex technology, so superior and flawless in every previous invasion, now seemed to be failing them in ways they couldn't understand. It didn't take long for them to realize this wasn't random, it was sabotage. Somehow, the humans had found a way to hack their systems. The very tech they had dismissed as primitive was now being used to disrupt their invasion. The Crothans scrambled to find the source, but human ingenuity, chaotic and decentralized, was beyond their ability to comprehend. Everywhere they turned, their systems were being compromised, not by brute force but by clever manipulation. Then came the moment that changed everything. A Crothan battleship, one of their most powerful, went off course. At first, the command assumed it was another malfunction, but as the ship's trajectory continued to shift, alarms rang out across the Crothan fleet. The battleship wasn't malfunctioning, it had been hijacked. Somehow, human forces had taken control of the massive ship. They had cracked the alien systems, overriding the command codes, and now the vessel's weapons were pointed at the rest of the fleet. Before the Crothan could react, the ship opened fire, plasma beams tearing through the sky, striking down their own landing craft. On the ground, human resistance fighters watched with grim satisfaction as the ship they had seized turned the tide of the battle. Inside the ship's control center, a small team of engineers and hackers, working in tandem with rogue military personnel, had pulled off the impossible. Using every bit of alien tech they had scavenged and studied, they had figured out how to infiltrate the Crothan systems. Their attack wasn't just on the ship, they were targeting the Crothan's entire infrastructure, shutting down their communications, disabling their defenses, and rendering their advanced weaponry useless. The Crothan leader watched in disbelief as his invasion force, once unstoppable, crumbled. He had severely underestimated the humans. What should have been an easy conquest was spiraling out of control. His communications were down, reports from the ground were sporadic at best, and every attempt to restore order was met with failure. His mind, so used to precision and order, struggled to comprehend the chaos that had overtaken his forces. The humans were supposed to be weak, predictable. Instead, their unpredictability had become their greatest weapon. He sent orders through what remained of the fleet's network, but his commands weren't reaching the ground. His soldiers were cut off, confused, and outmatched in a way they had never been before. They were still technologically superior, but that didn't seem to matter anymore. Their advantage had been neutralized by human resilience and creativity. The very traits the Crothan had dismissed, individualism, defiance, and ingenuity, were now the reasons they were losing. On Earth, the counteroffensive began. Human forces, bolstered by their recent victories, launched coordinated attacks against the alien strongholds. Military units worked side by side with civilian resistance groups. Engineers who had spent their lives building bridges and skyscrapers were now designing traps and disabling alien tech. Farmers, shopkeepers, and students all joined the effort, using their unique skills to contribute in ways no one had anticipated. A retired mechanic led a team that managed to convert an alien energy generator into a makeshift EMP device, taking down a Crothan outpost in the middle of a desert. A group of former telecom workers hacked into the remnants of the aliens' communication network, sending false signals and spreading misinformation, further throwing the invaders into disarray. In the cities, guerrilla fighters launched coordinated strikes, hitting supply depots and command centers with precision that even the most seasoned military tacticians couldn't have predicted. The Crothan commanders, once so confident in their victory, now found themselves in a nightmare. They had lost control. Their forces were scattered, their technology was failing, and the humans, those chaotic, unpredictable creatures, were winning. What was supposed to be a swift and decisive conquest had turned into a battle for survival, and the Crothan were beginning to understand that they were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. As the human counteroffensive surged, the invaders could only watch in horror as their empire's might was brought to its knees, not by a superior force, but by a species they had underestimated. This wasn't just a war anymore. For the Crothan, it was a nightmare. The Crothan, once proud conquerors, now found themselves on the defensive, an unfamiliar and terrifying position. Their fleets were no longer symbols of domination but targets for human attacks. In every corner of the planet, their forces were being hunted. What was once an orderly, calculated invasion had devolved into chaos. The humans had turned their tactics against them, using hit-and-run ambushes, sabotage, and psychological warfare to shatter the Crothanes' confidence. The invaders, who once moved with precision and control, were now scattered, scrambling for survival. Their ground forces, isolated and disoriented, could no longer rely on their superior technology to save them. They were trapped in a world that was no longer theirs to take. Human guerrilla tactics, sharpened by months of desperate resistance, now struck with devastating effect. In the forests, cities, and deserts, the Crothan found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. The humans had learned their weaknesses, vulnerable spots in their armor, gaps in their energy shields, blind spots in their surveillance systems. They used the terrain to their advantage, ambushing alien patrols from dense forests, striking from abandoned high-rises in the dead of night. The Crothan soldiers, once fearless, were being picked off one by one. Alien strongholds that had once seemed impenetrable were now falling, overrun by waves of human fighters who moved with precision and determination. One Crothan outpost in a ruined city found itself under siege. Human forces, armed with scavenged alien weaponry, breached the stronghold's defenses by tunneling beneath it. As the Crothan soldiers scrambled to reinforce their positions, the humans struck from all sides, breaching walls with explosives crafted from alien tech. They stormed the command center, overwhelming the Crothan with speed and brutality. The aliens had no time to react. Their advanced weaponry was useless in the face of the humans' unpredictable, relentless assault. In mere hours, the stronghold, once thought untouchable, fell. Elsewhere, the Crothanes supply lines were decimated by human sabotage. Alien convoys, loaded with weapons and reinforcements, were ambushed in remote regions. Roads were blocked, bridges destroyed, and vehicles hacked or disabled. The Crothan commanders, accustomed to precise logistics, now faced shortages in critical supplies. Panic spread through their ranks as they realized they could no longer trust their own technology. Every step they took, every move they made, was anticipated by the humans, who struck from the shadows and melted back into the landscape before the Crothan could respond. Inside the alien leadership, desperation was beginning to take hold. The Crothan leader, who had once scoffed at humanity's potential for resistance, now saw the terrifying reality: the humans were winning. They had adapted far beyond anything the Crothan could have predicted. Their creativity, once dismissed as disorganized chaos, had become their most potent weapon. Every tactic the Crothan had relied upon in past conquests was now turned against them. Worse still, their psychological warfare, based on fear and submission, was failing. Instead, it was the Crothan who were afraid. As the tide of the war shifted, whispers of retreat began to circulate among the alien leadership. What was supposed to be an easy conquest had become a quagmire. The Crothan forces, spread too thin, were being systematically dismantled. Their command structure was breaking down. For the first time in centuries, the Crothan were considering the unthinkable: they might have to abandon the invasion and retreat from Earth. But retreat would mean humiliation, a stain on their empire's record of flawless victories. The leader hesitated, torn between pride and survival. In the midst of this growing despair, an alien commander huddled in the darkness of a ruined building. The once feared general, responsible for leading countless conquests, now found himself alone, hiding from the very beings he had come to conquer. He could hear the humans outside, soft footsteps, the whisper of their voices as they closed in. His heart raced in a way it never had before, gripped by a fear he couldn't control. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The Crothan were the hunters, the predators. But now, they were the prey. The commander's thoughts raced as he clutched his weapon, though he knew it would be of little use. The humans moved like shadows, quick and silent, striking with brutal efficiency. He had seen it before, in the eyes of his fallen soldiers, that look of disbelief as they were cut down by creatures they had once thought inferior. His pulse quickened as he realized the humans were inside the building now, moving floor by floor. He was running out of time. In a moment of sheer terror, the alien commander understood what had happened. They hadn't just lost control of the invasion, they had lost control of the entire narrative. The humans were no longer defending themselves. They were hunting, and the Crothan were the prey in a nightmare that had spiraled out of their control. The last thing he heard was the echo of human footsteps approaching, then silence. The Crothan retreat began as a disorganized scramble. What remained of their fleet, crippled and in disarray, lifted off from the Earth's surface in a hasty withdrawal. The once mighty invaders, who had descended upon the planet with arrogance and certainty, were now nothing more than fleeing remnants. Their communication lines shattered, logistics destroyed, and morale broken, they had no choice but to abandon the conquest that had seemed so assured. Alien ships sputtered into orbit, battered by human counterattacks, unable to regroup effectively. Earth, which was meant to be a quick victory, had become a graveyard for their ambitions. As the last of the Crothan ships disappeared into the void, a cheer rose from across the planet. Humanity had done the impossible, they had stood against an intergalactic empire and won. In cities and towns that had been reduced to rubble, people gathered, embracing one another, united in their triumph. The cost had been high, but the spirit of survival had prevailed. Human ingenuity, adaptability, and sheer refusal to give up had turned the tide. They had not just defended their planet, they had fought as one, from military forces to civilians, against a common enemy. In the streets of a rebuilt city, children played among makeshift banners of victory, while engineers and workers began the long process of reconstruction. Debris was cleared, and people worked shoulder to shoulder, united by a common cause that transcended borders and differences. Scientists continued to study the remnants of Crothan technology, learning from the alien systems, ensuring humanity would be even stronger in the future. The scars of war were deep, but with each passing day, the Earth began to heal. There was a newfound unity in the air, a quiet, determined resilience that bound people together in ways that had never been seen before. In a small town, a group of former resistance fighters sat together, reflecting on the war. Ordinary citizens, they had become warriors out of necessity, and now they could lay down their arms. One of them smiled grimly, looking up at the sky. "They'll think twice before coming back here," she said, her voice filled with hard-won pride. Across the planet, similar sentiments echoed. Humanity had proven something, not just to the Crothan, but to themselves. They were stronger, more resilient, and more capable of adaptation than anyone, even they themselves, had believed. Far from Earth, deep in the Crothan home system, the fallout from the defeat spread like wildfire. What had been meant to be a routine invasion had become the most catastrophic loss in the Empire's history. The Crothan leadership, once proud and untouchable, faced humiliation on an unprecedented scale. Earth, the tiny blue planet they had deemed irrelevant, had dealt them a blow that would echo through the centuries. In council chambers and command rooms, the discussions were hushed and somber. There was no longer any talk of conquering Earth. Instead, the planet had earned a new reputation among the stars, a nightmare world, untouchable, unapproachable. The fear that had gripped their soldiers now extended to the entire species. Among the Crothan's warrior caste, the defeat became a cautionary tale. The name of Earth was spoken in whispers, a symbol of humiliation, a planet that had broken the Empire's will. No one would ever dare to suggest an invasion of that world again. It had become a symbol of everything the Crothan had failed to understand: chaos, creativity, and the will to survive at any cost. Their empire would move on, but the shame of their defeat on Earth would never fade. For humanity, the victory was more than just a defense of their home. It was proof of their greatest strengths, unity in the face of impossible odds, adaptability that no invader could predict, and a resilience that refused to be broken. What had begun as a fight for survival had ended with a profound realization: humanity was stronger together than apart. They had learned from each other, fought beside each other, and stood victorious because of their shared will to endure. In the end, the Crothan learned a truth too late: Earth was not a world to conquer, it was a force of nature, one that would never bow, never break. Humanity, for all its flaws and divisions, had shown that when pushed to the edge, it could rise higher than anyone could have imagined. The aliens had come to Earth expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found a nightmare.